Alright guys, so as it comes to the shock of probably no one anymore, the news is official that the Legacy, as it is called, Scar Heavy and Scar Light, or the 17 and the 16, are going to be discontinued by FN. And I thought, as a Scar Heavy owner, semi-recently Scar Heavy owner, I thought I would chime in on this because I see a lot of other people on the YouTubes talking about this, and I think that there is a lot, especially from active Scar owners. I think that there is a ton of just animosity to it. People are sad, they're mad, they're confused, they don't really know how to feel. And I feel like I'm one of the few people that isn't entirely sad to see this pretty cool gun get discontinued. Now, I am a little bit sad, and like I said, we'll kind of talk about the full ramifications of this discontinue, at least from my perspective, and why, like I said, I'm not entirely sad to see the Scar go. But yeah, let's first talk about the thing that does make me kind of sad about the Scar and seeing it discontinued. Now, the biggest thing for me that does make me sad is kind of this unfortunate reality of where the Scar has lived for its entire legacy, especially on in the civilian realm. And that is that, especially with the marketing from FN, this gun has always kind of been touted as a battle rifle, something that is, designed to essentially punch in the same weight and class as things like a Springfield M1A, things like the FNFAL, things like the G3 or PTR, that kind of roller delayed 308 rifle. And so basically, that is where the Scar H especially has always been kind of in its world. And I think, unfortunately for the Scar, when you look at this rifle, a Scar H especially, as a battle rifle, I think that this gun is very unattractive, because when you think of things, like I said, like the M1A, like the FALs, they are oftentimes about half the price. They usually go for about $1,500 to $2,000. When you look at something like a Scar Heavy, it often goes for about $3,000 plus. And so if you were to compare this to other battle rifles in that kind of realm or terminology, this thing is going to be very expensive. And when you think of the capabilities of a typical battle rifle, once again, like an M1A, an FAL, G3, we know that these are kind of minute of man, or they're not inaccurate, but these are not sub-MOA precision gas driven rifles. They are designed to be battle rifles. They're designed to, once again, hit that minute of man, or essentially hit a man-sized target at 100 yards. That's kind of what they're designed to do, and to push past maybe up to about 300 yards, be fairly reliably accurate, and hit that, once again, man-sized target out to the 300-yard mark. Now, within reason, that isn't a bad thing by any means, but if you're viewing the Scar Heavy or the Scar 17 or the Scar 20 in that perspective, in that kind of realm, then it is very expensive. And ultimately, I really don't think that the Scar should be looked at or viewed from that perspective. I think that the Scar really should actually be viewed, and when you look at it this way, it makes it far better, but you should be looking at the Scar more as a sapper. And what a sapper is, for those who don't know, is a semi-auto precision rifle. And when you're able to look at the Scar as a sapper, that really opens up, or really puts into perspective, that now we're not just talking about things like the M1A, things like the FAL, things like the G3 or its derivative clones. We're looking at things like the SR25. We're looking at precision gas, semi-auto gas-driven rifles. And once again, using the reference of the SR25, that is a $10,000 plus platform, or just rifle. And so when we start looking at the Scar in that regard, this is actually a pretty good bargain. And the reason why I do think we should look at the Scar 17 as a sapper as opposed to a battle rifle is, while yes, it is a 308, just like other battle rifles are, this is a far more precise gun. This gun is known for sub-minute of angle groups, and so this thing is really more qualifying, or pushing into that qualification of a semi-auto, because it is semi-auto precision rifle. And once again, when we look at it in that regard, a $3,000 sapper or precision gas gun really is not that unreasonable. And so what I think, like I said, for that kind of sapper role, it's, sub-minute of angle, groups at 100 yards, being able to easily stretch out to 1,000 yards or meters. And that is something that the SCAR H can do. And of course, the SCAR 20 as well can do that even better. And, but when you look at both of these SCARs in their platform, they're really, or in that kind of light, they're really actually fairly budget options in that regard. Now, I think that that's the part where the SCAR H or 17 and the 20 have been just kind of in this identity crisis, because like I said, everyone really looks at this gun and games categorize it as a battle rifle, people categorize it, FN markets it as a battle rifle. And so when you do that, unfortunately, this really is kind of a misnomer. I mean, technically it's not, because once again, theoretically at its face, anything that's a battle rifle is a rifle that goes into battle. But theoretically, when we think of it, it's typically a 308, rifle that in military terms is full auto, civilian is semi-auto. So you have like the select fire military or semi-auto for civies. And so when you look at it in that regard, it's not technically a misnomer, but it really should be more known as a semi-auto precision rifle. And like I said, when you're able to look at it like that, it is actually punching above its weight. Now, that is one of the biggest reasons why I was drawn to the SCAR and why I ended up picking one up, is because I was looking at how can I, have a very well-rounded collection without having a ton of guns, and what can be a gun that I can stretch out to distance very easily. And it really just leads back to the SCAR. And the reason why is because things like the FNFAL are not inherently accurate. Things like the M1A from Springfield can be accurate if you accurize them, and you get aftermarket stocks, level your receiver to your bed of your stock, and just a whole bunch of stuff. I'm sure I'm butchering things already, but there's a whole process to accurizing an M1A, and G3s or their derivatives are not particularly accurate either. And so when I was looking at all my options, weighing things out, how can I get a gas gun that is going to help extend the range of my collection, like have that kind of long range option, all roads kind of just led back to the SCAR. So that's why I ended up getting one. Now, that's kind of the biggest pro to this gun. Now, when we think about the SCAR in other terms, this is where I'm like not that sad to see the SCAR go the way of the dinosaur. Now, I am excited, like other people, that there may be further iterations, future generations of the SCAR, things like that in the works, and there probably are. But I do hope that, I doubt anyone from FN will ever see this particular video, but I do hope that people catch on and really express this to FN, that I really do hope with future rifles they correct a few things that plague the SCAR. So the first thing for me is the just antiquated kind of concept for this rifle to go suppressed. Now, obviously, suppressors have really picked up in the past, I would say 5 years more than anything, but especially in the last handful of years, suppressors have gotten very large. Unfortunately, the SCAR, for those who are already aware, if you mount a suppressor to a civilian SCAR, it voids the warranty. You have to have shims so that it will properly, whatever, muzzle device you install will be properly hubbed up to your actual, threaded portion of your barrel. And so that's important for alignment of a suppressor. Then you also have to change out your gas block in here, because the gas block it is adjustable in SCARs, but it really just has two positions where it's standard operating and then adverse. So you have a setting that's already fairly gassy and then a setting that can make it even more gassy. So aftermarket does exist for this, for you to be able to put suppressed kind of ports in here that function in the same way that normal kind of ports do for this, but block out a little bit more gas, making the overall cycling speeds and stuff just a little bit nicer and easier on the SCAR itself. So you have to change that out. You have to shim threaded portion of your barrel, it's just not really a fun time. And that's why I have not gone ahead and, I don't run a suppressor on my Scar. It's not because I don't have a 30 cal can. I actually do indeed have a 30 cal can that I could actually put on this Scar. And initially when I got the Scar, I was like, oh yeah, I'll totally do this. And while I do actually have the shims for it, I'd have to get the ports for the gassing system. And overall, I just don't really want to mess with it. It's more than I want to take into account right now and like I said, mess with. There's a whole bunch of other projects that I'm working on with firearms at the moment, so not particularly high on the list to make this gun suppressor ready. That may happen in the future. Like I said, I do have some of the parts for it, but it's just something that's not super high on the priority list. But once again, hopefully with future iterations of FN rifles, like sappers and such, they will make suppressing them much easier. In addition to this too, I think one of the biggest kickers to why the Scar failed, and I mean, I won't say that this thing was an entire failure. It did, I think, most of what it was designed to do. And I think when the Scar was first released in the early 2000s, like 2007, 2008, it really was quite a legendary and quite a ahead of its time rifle. And even to this day, it's not bad. Once again, a strong use of polymers, as FN has been known for in the 2000s now for doing, has certainly made this gun quite light for a 308, kind of battle rifle, for lack of better terminology. So that is pretty cool, but really after this rifle was released, there was no real modernization. And this is why, I think a lot of us talk about why is the AR-15 such a relevant firearm platform, and that's because the AR-15, it was invented, patented, going on 100 years ago, and so it is not a new rifle by any stretch of the imagination. But almost every year you will notice, new forends, new triggers, new, a litany of different things that you can do, different stocks, different, just customizations as a whole. And so the innovation and customization of things like the AR-15 and AK platforms, has never really ceased since the creation of those firearm platforms. Now, unfortunately, the Scar, even though it's less than 20 years old, it was released in 2007, it's less than 20 years old and it's already being phased out. The biggest problem is that FN1 has made this so expensive. You notice all the parts, everything to making a Scar work, like the Geisley trigger is stupid expensive. Different aftermarket parts on this thing are just so incredibly expensive. But making this gun work is expensive, or making this thing modern, I should say, and customized is expensive and not very easy, and there's often not that many options. Like aftermarket triggers is basically just Geisley. They're the only ones that really make a trigger for this firearm. And so, there's just not a lot of innovation to it. And even looking at FN themselves, like taking, for instance, one of the biggest things is this, charging handle right here. And this is an older modeled Scar 17, so it does have the reciprocating charging handle. When it fires, it reciprocates. But it took them over 10 years after the product was launched, after this firearm was launched, over 10 years to make an iteration of the Scar that has a non-reciprocating charging handle. And so for me, I really hope that the future kind of Scar, if you will, or whatever FN produces next, I really hope it sees better just attention to detail and better iterations, generational improvements, because I think that's one of the biggest killers to the Scar. Yes, the price, but also to the fact that after 2007, this gun was largely, it was put out by FN, and of course they continued to produce it, but after that it was largely just put on a shelf and, or I should say not put on a shelf, but rather just set to keep printing basically the same gun. They're manufacturing, they're not really changing anything generationally. And even with that non-reciprocating charging handle version, that's the only generational improvement that the Scar has really ever seen. And there hasn't been any change to ergonomics, there hasn't been any change to compatibility of other, accessories, mounts, and of course the aftermarket has come through, and I have one myself. I just haven't put it on this one yet. We'll see if I do. But you can get extensions for, key mod, or sorry, not key, well, key mod too, but M-lock and pick rail extensions that go, further up the barrel. And like I said, I have one, just haven't put it on this one, but realistically, these things should be factory options, if not factory standard. These generational improvements shouldn't be entirely coming from aftermarket. You should see some form of generational improvement, like I said, after 10 years, maybe adding some form of extension. And I am aware that they did make the SCAR 20S as well, and so they did make a newer firearm, but it really just didn't do much. Like I said, they really sat on their laurels with this design. And so I think when the SCAR 17 and 16 first came out, yes, this was truly an innovative and revolutionary firearm. I think personally the 17 and the 20 were more innovative than the 16, just because the 16 was competing with the already venerable M4A1 for military contracts, and of course you're not going to dethrone the M4A1. So unfortunately that was an impossible feat, but I really do think, in all honesty, that the SCAR 17 and 20 really had something special if FN had really chose to do more with this platform other than create it and then just make it and just send it out the door without, like I said, really any generational improvements that were significant or worthwhile or meaningful, in my opinion. So I really do wish that the SCAR would have seen more improvement, and I do hope, like I said, for the future, whatever SCAR or FN has planned for this platform and for that kind of 308 sapper lineup, now that they're discontinuing this rifle, I do hope that they make it a lot more modular, and I do hope that they continue to stay on top of it after the creation, actually make meaningful, worthwhile generational improvements, and not just pump something out and just keep making it and hoping that it sells, because one day you'll find, much like the SCAR, that after a while it's not selling. And I think that was kind of the point that they were hammering home when they decided to discontinue the SCAR 17, 16, and 20, is that they just weren't selling. And once again, it's really largely because, especially if you already own one, not only are they expensive, but there's absolutely no reason to buy a more modern one other than, like I said, maybe the non-reciprocating charging handle. But if that's the only thing, then I'm not compelled to go and get the next latest and greatest. And so I think that's the big thing of what really put the nail in the coffin for the SCAR, in my opinion, even though, like I said, it is a pretty fantastic rifle. And unfortunately now the prices are probably going to go up. But back when I got it, which, like I said, admittedly wasn't that long ago, and even before then, if you really did view the SCAR 17 as a precision rifle, semi-auto precision rifle, this is really a hard to beat precision rifle out there, because while, yes, like I said, there are bolt guns that can easily do what this can do, you will quickly find, if you are uninitiated, that finding a semi-auto 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor platform that will reliably and accurately deliver bullets onto target is very difficult. And so having the SCAR platform as that was pretty cool, because even though, like I said, the SCAR platform is about $3,000 to buy in, your alternatives are looking at things like Knight's Armament with the SR25, or looking at things like Geisley with their new rifle that I'm totally blanking on the name of, but the one that just won military contracts. So once again, you're looking at essentially AR-10 platforms that are very expensive, easily more expensive than the SCAR platform, and honestly delivering similar and equivocal accuracy to the SCAR. So that's where I think that this gun really shines. And unfortunately, like I said, it was always kind of touted as this, big heavy duty battle rifle kind of thing. And that's cool, and that's totally fine. And once again, I've shot this gun plenty enough up close, like at closer ranges, and it works. It can certainly be ran fast and easy at close range, but where it really shines is in the longer range performance. So anyways, I will stop beating that dead horse and digress, but hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully, like I said, I don't know if anyone from FN will ever see this, but I do think that that's really what FN needs to focus on with their new whatever platform that they come out to replace the SCAR with. It needs to be modular, it needs to be updated. You can't just release, one generational improvement through the lifetime, near 20 year span of the rifle, and expect it to sell well. It's just not how the market works. I'm not saying you necessarily need to pull an iPhone and, have an entirely new generation every single year that, totally nullifies the previous year's generation. It's not necessarily what I'm saying, but you do need every handful of years, at least every 5 years, to come out with some more meaningful, changes to the platform, modernize it, update it, make it compatible with more AR parts, or make it compatible with whatever, AR10 parts, make it more modular, do X, Y, or Z. I mean, it blows my mind that in the years that this thing has existed, that they never made cutie, sling swivel cups. These are aftermarket from, who is it? Parker Mountain Machine, and they're super easy, as you can see, super easy to install. But it blows my mind that there was never any integral, in any part of this rifle, any integral sling cutie cups on this thing. It was something that was aftermarket, easy for me to do, but it's something that really should have been factored into this rifle as a quality of life kind of update. But anyways, it's just stuff like that that makes me sad when it comes to the SCAR 17 and 20 in particular. Anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, God bless, and I'm out.